in advance of the book launch, I had a whole launch plan and all the things I'm going to do. And I decided to launch a podcast because I had been guesting on podcasts a lot, and that had been decent for my business. And a lot of people that called me would say, "Oh, I heard you on so-and-so's podcast." So I thought, well, I'll launch my own podcast. I also thought it would be fun to go deeper on topics related to positioning, because if I'm on someone else's podcast, for their audience, it's probably the first time they ever thought about positioning, or they don't know anything about positioning. So we have to start from the beginning, and there's only so far we can get in half an hour, 45 minutes. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have my own podcast, and I'm going to pick specific things around positioning or related to positioning, and then do a really deep dive on that. And that'll be what the podcast is about. And occasionally I'll have a guest, but mostly it'll be me solo doing my weird positioning deep dive thing. And that's kind of nichey, but fine. I think people that are into it will be into it.
Doing your
So
yakking, right? That's how
doing
you
my
like
yakking.
That's what we all do on podcasts is yak. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I thought, well, that'll be good. And it was good, but I think I underestimated how much prep was involved to be able to sit down and do a good half-hour episode on a fairly deep topic. And then the worst thing that happened with the podcast is that I had 5 or 6 podcasts recorded before I launched. And then my production people, when they got the actual files, decided that the video quality was not good enough and wanted me to do them again. So instead of having this flexibility where I didn't have to produce one every week, all of a sudden I had to produce one every week in the middle of a very busy book launch and me being on the road and speaking at a lot of conferences and stuff. So that ended up being a lot more hectic than I had predicted. The other thing that I didn't anticipate about podcasting is that I am used to doing written content. And for the stuff that I cover, I feel like I'm very careful to be precise in what I say, because people will quite often challenge me on things. So they'll say, well, you said this thing and that was wrong. And so I try to be very precise.
Yeah.
So when I say something, I'll say, this is not always true, but sometimes you have this, instead of saying, you always have to do it like this, which is generally bad advice all the time. So I try to be very precise, but it is harder to be precise on a podcast when I'm just kind of yakking.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That I did not anticipate that would bug me, but it did bug me. When I went back and listened to some of the episodes, I was like, that's not exactly what I meant. And I should have said this. And in a way that, in written content, I would just write it. And then I go back and say, well, that's not really what I meant. And I can be very precise in written content in a way that I can't do in a podcast. And so I'm not sure podcasting agrees with me that much. It's
no, I think podcasting agrees with you very much because of the growth that you saw over the past 6 months. I saw you post about it on LinkedIn. That is amazing. You're a top 2% podcast after 6 months. So do not say, April, that podcasting doesn't agree with you. You might not agree with podcasting because you feel that pain when you are like listening back and you're like, oh, that's not quite what I meant to say. I say you just go right over that and keep going. And if you say something, just make sure that you keep that in mind not to say that again.
Yeah, right. Maybe that's it. The other thing is that I don't think I could keep going indefinitely doing a solo show.
Welcome to the Modern Startup Marketing Podcast. As always, I am your host, Anna Furmanov, and I am welcoming back April Dunford. She's here for round 2. She must like me. That's why she's back for round 2.
That's obviously it.
That's obviously it. We had a great conversation the last time that you were on. Check out episode. It's called.
That feels like a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. So it was about time for you to come back because that's when we talked a lot about positioning. We talked about a lot about your previous book, obviously awesome. But now you came out with another book. So I'm trying to keep, stay on top of things here, April. You just keep on writing books. Like it's like a snap of the fingers and another book is out.
One every 4 years.
That's true. Not so fast. So that episode,
COVID was in the middle there, and we don't count that. We don't like to think about that time.
We don't. Yeah. No, we don't. That episode though is called There's More to Positioning Than Just Talking to Your Customers. We talk about where most companies go wrong with their positioning. We talk about your approach to positioning, and like we definitely touched on the idea of like, take me back before you bought my thing. What was the trigger? So we talked about that. We talk about there's a handful of things that are important early stage when you only you have your first few customers? What are those things? We talked about your top challenges because I always like to find out what are you having a hard time with? What are you trying to figure out? That's really helpful and kind of level set. Everybody's got their thing that they're working on. So great episode. Check that out. April Dunford, if you haven't heard of her, she is a positioning master. One thing I wanted to ask you before we get into things is your company that you started. It's called Ambient Strategy. Did you just forget about that name and just go straight to, because now I see April Dunford, it's everywhere. So are you using your name now as kind of your company?
It's always been my brand. The only reason there's a name for the company at all is really it's mainly for legal reasons, but it's also, when you go to a conference, they'll say, "What's your company name?" Like you kind of need a company name in life, but I have not invested any time, energy, focus in making that name a brand. I would assume that most people don't know the name of it. It actually doesn't matter. So it's just a legal thing mainly. Like the brand is me. It's just me. I don't have any employees. It's just me. It's just me. That's the company. It's me.
That's the company. Yeah, that makes sense. And you're a positioning master. I wanted to ask you, did you put some thought into are you creating a new category? Because you do stand out as April Dunford, positioning master. How do you position yourself?
I don't believe I created a new category. Positioning existed long before I came on the scene, and there have been consultants and people helping companies with positioning way before I showed up. So I don't think I created anything new other than my own frustration when I was in-house as a VP marketing was that I was trying to do positioning and there didn't seem to be a methodology for doing it. I found that very frustrating. The consultants that I tried to hire to come in and fix it for me didn't want to share. They had methodologies, but it was a big secret. And so they were going to come in and interview people and interview customers and then go away and do their secret positioning thing and then come back and do the big unveil. Here's the positioning. And that bothered me because I felt like this was a competency we needed to develop internally. And so if I did bring someone in, I wanted somebody to teach me how to do it so that we didn't have to bring them in for the next product and the product after that, or when we needed to do a repositioning. So I think my contribution to positioning stuff is my attempt to put a methodology around here's one way that we could do positioning for people that are out there like me trying to figure out how to get this stuff done in practicality inside a company where everything's on fire.
Totally. Yeah, that makes sense. Great. Well, so I want to do this episode a little bit different because it's you, April, and I think I want to have a little bit of fun with this episode.
Okay.
And make it unique.
Fun's allowed.
Yes, fun is allowed. It should be allowed. But let's start with the book. I've got the book right here because I read it, sales pitch, and I made some underlines and I went back into the book. And from the book, there's one point in there where it says the goal of a great sales pitch is to help customers understand all their choices, the trade-offs between each, and when to pick your solution. And this is something that before I read your book, I wasn't really thinking about that because now that I have my own business, I put my marketing hat on, I put my sales hat on. I'm kind of doing all the things just like you. And so I didn't really think about the fact that, okay, I get into a sales conversation and I have to help people understand all of their choices and trade-offs. First, when does this conversation take place? Is this like a discovery call? This is usually I just have one call with a prospect, and this is where it's discovering what their needs are, where the pain points are, and how I can come in and help solve them. But when I share how I can come in and help solve them, sometimes there's two calls, right? First, you have your initial conversation to kind of figure out if there's a fit, and then you pass it over to the next person. I don't do that. I just have one call. So does this conversation take place either in the first call or the second call? And it's before you share how you fit, why you're the best, why you're going to bring the differentiated value. When does this conversation take place?
So let me answer that question by I'll tell you how companies do it, like a software company does it, and then I'll tell you how I do it as a consultant because they're kind of two different situations. So for the companies that I work with, typically, if you have a sales function, typically there's some kind of qualification that happens before a lead gets booked on a first substantive sales call. So what we would call a first sales call. Usually there's some kind of qualification that happens after that. And that's just to make sure that it's worth doing the call at all. Like, do you have the budget? Are you the right size? Do you tick all the boxes to make you a good fit for us? So we've already established at a very high level, the prospect is a good fit. So the prospect comes in. You really have to put yourself in the shoes of a buyer at this point. So most buyers of B2B software have never bought a product like yours before. Like, let's say you sell CRM. How often do you buy a new CRM? Hardly ever. So the person who's trying to do the purchase of this CRM, they use CRM. They know a little bit about CRM. Maybe they used a different CRM at their previous company, but they don't know what the state of the art of CRM technology is. They don't know what they have to think about. They don't know, like, they've done their homework before they got to you, and they've learned whatever they can glean from reading everybody's website and looking at G2 Crowd and looking at the Gartner reports, but they don't know what they don't know. We, on the other hand, know a lot. As vendors, we know everything. We eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. We know the whole market. We know all the differences between us and everybody else. We understand all this stuff. What customers really want in a sales conversation is they want to make sure they're making a good choice. So they want to make a good choice. They want to make that choice confidently. So if you look at the data on this, the data on this shows that a B2B purchaser, what they really want from a salesperson in a sales call is perspectives on the market and pros and cons of different approaches to the problem. Like, help me avoid a bad choice here. So it's interesting that 99% of the time when they get to sales, sales doesn't do that. Sales is just talking about us. And that's interesting. I mean, it's interesting information, but it doesn't necessarily answer the question, why pick you over the other guys? Because all you're talking about is you. They're answering the question. Sales is answering the question, why pick you, but not why pick you versus everybody else. I think a really great sales call, we come in and we start with our point of view on the market. It says, look, we look at this a little bit differently, and we built what we built because we believe something different than all of our competitors. This is our point of view. And we think that these kinds of things are true. Now let's look at the whole market. And what we want to do is paint a picture of the market and look at all the other approaches that a customer could take to the problem. So they could do it with a spreadsheet, and here's the pluses of that and the minuses of that. Or you could do it with this approach, like an enterprise legacy solution. Pluses are this, minuses are this. Or you could do it with something like this. And then we have this moment in the sales pitch where we say, look, like, knowing what we know about what we're actually trying to accomplish here, and knowing what we know about what works and doesn't work with the other alternatives out there, can we both agree that a perfect solution would kind of tick these boxes? And if the customer's like, yeah, right, it would, then we pitch them our stuff. Because the idea is, now I've got you all aligned to my point of view in the world. I've positioned everybody else in the market. I've given you a rubric for understanding all your different choices. And we both agreed that something that ticks these boxes, which, by the way, only I tick those boxes. We've agreed that that's good for a company like you. Now we're going to go into the pitch. Now I'm going to show you what I can do. So I think that's the opportunity for us, is to really help a customer buy, help them make a decision, give them a way to think about the entire market, not just us.
Yeah.
So that's how most of the companies that I work with, that's what happens. In that conversation where we're talking about the pluses and minuses of different solutions, we are also doing discovery. So in a first substantive sales call, we need to understand, what is the customer doing right now? What other alternative approaches are they considering? So you're in there saying, look, we work with companies just like you, and here's what we're seeing. They either do this or they do this or they do this. Does this resonate with you? What are you doing right now? Are you looking at other things? What are those other things that you're looking for? Do you have constraints in that? So we have a nice spot to actually do discovery, which we need to do in a first sales call as well. So that's how companies that I work with do it. If I think about my consulting, it's a little bit different in that I don't have the qualification happens before the person gets to me in a number of different ways. So some people will qualify because they've read my book or they've consumed tuned my content. If you've read the book, you know exactly what I do, because the things that I do in a workshop are completely laid out in the 2 books. So if you read those 2 books, you know what I do. There's no secret. And then there's also, when you fill out the contact form on my website, you can see how much I charge for a workshop and and there's a bunch of things on there that say, look, I only work with B2B companies. I don't work with consumer companies. I only work with companies that are in the market. So all my criteria are there. And it kind of says, if you don't meet these boxes, like, don't even bother filling the form out. so so they're qualified. By the time they hit me, this basic level qualification has happened. What hasn't happened is this discovery, which is, what exactly is the customer wrestling with? Is it even a positioning problem? Maybe it's not. What other things have they tried? Do I think I can help these folks? Which is what I do in a first call. But in every first call, I am talking about the alternatives to working with me. The main alternative to working with me is just do it yourself, buddy. There's 2 books. It costs $18. You can buy the 2 books and do it yourself. And I often, for companies that haven't wrestled with their positioning much, by the time they get to me, I usually push back on them a little, say, have you tried it? Because a lot of companies just use my books and do it themselves. And that's easy, free, fast. This is a better alternative for a lot of companies, to be honest. So I do talk about that.
Do you think that sometimes I look for that too? Like, have you tried to do the marketing yourself? When I work with early stage startups and I'm like a fractional head of marketing for them, and I ask, like, have you tried it? And I've thought about that. If they haven't tried anything, maybe there are different reasons why I should not work with this client. Because today you can try things yourself. You can read books. You can actually go and start doing things, right? And as a founder of an early stage startup, there's nothing that should stop someone from trying some things.
Exactly.
So I think that's
I also think you have this thing that if people haven't tried to solve the problem themselves internally, they sometimes underestimate the difficulty of solving the thing. And what they want is magic. Magic. But if they've tried to do it themselves, then they've had their magic bubble popped already. They're coming in and they're like, we tried it. It was hard. Some companies come to me and they haven't tried it, but most of the ones that I end up working with that come to me and say they haven't tried it are very thoughtful about why they think it's not going to work for them to do it on their own. So I had a CEO call me just recently. CEO called me and I said, look, like, you got a fancy CMO in there. She's very good. Why don't you just do this yourself? And he said, oh, we can't.
Like, they know their weakness.
He had assessed, and I think he was correct on this. So he had a fairly new executive team almost across the board. So brand new head of sales, brand new head of marketing, fairly new head of product. And he's the founder. So he's been there since the beginning. And he said, look, we could try to do this together. But what I don't want is I don't want my head of marketing running the process. I want my head of marketing to participate for marketing. That was actually really smart, thoughtful thing to say. The second thing is, he said, the main thing I want to get out of this is getting everybody in agreement and alignment. And I think that is it would be easier and better to do that with an outside facilitator. And so this is why I want you to come in and do it. He said, I thought about doing it myself, but I don't think we'd be able to do the same job. And that's good. So he'd thought about it. He hadn't actually tried to do it himself, but he thought about it and he had good, thoughtful reasons for why he didn't think it would work. The majority of companies that come to me, though, they have been thrashing for months, sometimes years on the stuff before they get to me.
Oh my gosh. Positioning. I had a couple of early stage startups on the podcast earlier today, and I asked them, what's the most challenging thing about marketing? And they both said, without a second thought, positioning is the hardest thing for us right now. And I think it continues to be, because you have to come back to it and you have to massage
right. You're never done. It
changes
changes over time.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. So that's why I think this is going to be a cool episode, because I want to start to talk about, we'll get there. I just have a couple other questions, but I want to talk about applying the sales pitch process from the book to you and also to me. Like, I want to go through this exercise. I think it's going to be fun. So with the choices, you're like, I didn't sign up for this, but having specific
it's your show, man. You get to do whatever you want. That's the great thing about being the podcast host.
It's the best. So going back to, though, that from the book, what I pulled out, and we just talked about goal of a great sales pitch, helping customers understand all their choices. How specific should you get on choices? Is it like when you shouldn't just bring something in that you haven't been hearing from prospects. You should only
Exactly.
bring in choices that you're hearing, because why muddy it more and get them confused and get them to like stop listening to you, go check out someone else's website? You don't want to do that. So
You
it
don't
really
want to
should
do
just
that.
be specific to what what you've heard, what they're talking about.
Here's a couple of things I think that are important to think about. We don't actually compete with products. If we're a product business, we don't actually compete with products. We compete with approaches to the problem. And so in a discussion like that in a sales pitch, I think it's helpful to keep the discussion at the approach level and not try to listen to all 900 companies that do a thing that's like you and then try to explain why they all suck. I think it's better to look at the competitive landscape and say, look, there's a bunch of folks that approach this problem like content management and they do it like this. And there's another bunch of folks that approach the problem like learning management and they do it like this. And here's the pluses and minuses of those approaches. The risk you get into when you start naming actual competitors or naming actual companies is exactly what you said. If you name a company that the prospect hasn't looked at, you're just freaking them out. They'll be like, damn, I thought I did my homework. Then now you're mentioning something that I never heard of. Stop the presses. We are no longer in buy mode. I got to go back to research mode and do my research again because you just freaked me out. And the whole thing is, I'm trying to make you feel confident about making choices. So what I want to do is paint a picture of the world that any company that you might mention, I can say, oh yeah, they go in that bucket. Oh yeah, they go in that bucket. You've done your homework. This is how it works. It's this and this. You only have 3 choices, not 29 choices. You have 3. And you can go out and keep doing research or whatever, but I'm just going to keep putting them in a bucket.
It's
So that's
beautiful.
it. I think it's risky to start naming competitors unless there's an elephant in the room competitor. Like if you're in the CRM space, I don't think there's any risk in naming Salesforce because there's no way a prospect hasn't at least thought about Salesforce. They might not seriously be considering them because they're too expensive or too whatever. But you could mention Salesforce all day and no one's going to go, oh, never heard of them. Got to go back and do my research. You can do that. But anybody other than Salesforce, I wouldn't name them because what's important is I understand the approach and where I might bucket things. And then I'd ask the question, well, are you looking at any other folks? Oh, yeah, we're looking at these guys. Oh, good. They sit in that bucket. Oh, you're talking about them? Oh, yeah, they go over here.
No, it's great. I think this is a great approach. And I think that you had already mentioned my question of why does this approach work? It's because you're trying to help them be confident about making choices.
Yes.
So that is part of being
It's exactly it. If you look at the research on this for B2B software, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. There's research on this shows that 40 to 60% of B2B purchase processes end in no decision. And then if you scratch down on that data, the majority of the time, the no decision does not mean we looked at all our choices and decided the status quo was better. No, it actually means we looked at all our choices. Everything kind of looked the same. We couldn't figure out how to confidently make a decision that wasn't going to get us in trouble and wasn't going to fail or wasn't going to not be adopted or whatever. Everything looked risky. And we just said, forget it. Let's make the decision next year. Let's make it the decision the year after that. I can't figure out what to do here. So I'm simply going to do nothing because everything looks risky. Yeah. So it is our job in sales to counteract that. And the best way to counteract that is to help customers think about the whole market, not just you, the whole market. Because that's what they need to understand in order to make really confident choices.
Yeah. And this ties into now I want to talk about the sales pitch process. And you had already started to uncover what that looks like, those different parts of the sales pitch process. But let me just reiterate what those are. And then I want to try and apply them to your business and to my business. And we'll see where this goes. So the first part.
I will caveat this was not meant like this was designed for B2B software product companies, not necessarily for services businesses and not necessarily for what we do. But sure, let's try it.
Let's just try it because then it'll be like a tangible example. And I'm always trying to think of ways. I know it's not exact, it's not perfect, but we're a business. We're selling something and there are buyers out there. And we also go through this sales pitch or it's not, the sales process. So I don't think that it's too far off, but I know April, when you just came on and you were telling me like about the podcast podcast and saying things. And now you're like, there's a caveat here. I totally get why you're doing this.
Right.
You're like, this was not meant for service businesses. All right.
Yeah, yeah. Just so you
So
know. Yeah.
just so you know. All right. So the first thing is you talk about your insight. What is your unique insight given your differentiated value and given your best fit customer that will actually care about why your unique value matters to them? So that insight is how it all begins. And you had mentioned like, what's your point of view, right?
Yep.
Then going into alternatives, which we just talked about. What are the different approaches? Then you go into the perfect world. So you summarize what you just covered and make sure that your point of view is important to them and make sure that they're aligned with your point of view. So if this is the perfect world, then do you agree? Okay, then you can go on, right? And you can talk about what you are, what you do. That's called the introduction. And then you talk about the differentiated value. So this is where you recommend spending the most time, and
This
that
is
makes
the meat.
sense. This
Why
is the
pick us
meat.
over the other guys? This is the value we can deliver. No one else can. Yep.
Yes, yes. Spend the most time here. Then you give the proof. The proof is like, well, why should we believe you? Well, we have customers and there's testimonials and there's case studies. So there's
Yep.
proof. And then the last part is objections, and ask if that comes up. Like if there might be objections, but there might not be. And I think ask is like, what are we
It's
going to
what
do
do we want to
next?
do
Right?
next? So we want
Yeah.
to end the sales pitch with here's what happened next. So whatever the next step is in your sales process. So
Yeah.
for a product company, it might be, hey, we want to do a proof of concept. Who do we need to talk to about that? Or it could just be asking for the sale. Can I send you a quote? Can I, whatever the next step is in your sales process, that's the
Yeah.
ask.
Okay. So let's just start from the beginning. And I think spending time on insight and like unique insight given differentiated
Insight is
value.
the hard piece. And I'll tell
It's
you,
so hard.
it's been the hardest for me to figure out how to teach people and explain it. So I started out just doing positioning work, and it became clear to me very quickly that if we just did positioning work and we didn't take the positioning and translate it into a sales pitch, then all the positioning would stop the moment you went to sales. Like sales didn't know how to pitch it. So I go in and work with a company, we'd shift the positioning and sales would be like, that sounds great. Oh, that's all good. But they'd have no idea how to pitch it. So it became clear to me, we're going to have to build the pitch too. And then I thought, well, surely this is a previously solved problem. We know how to build a sales pitch. People have been pitching since the dawn of time. There must be some sales pitch structure that everybody uses. And so I went out to look at what existed, and there was nothing that for me really worked. There were a lot of people were just doing a product walkthrough, which doesn't give us any way to position anything. So I kind of eliminated that. We can't do it with a product walkthrough. What I learned when I started building pitches was problem solution. We're going to talk about the problem, then we're going to talk about the solution. The problem with the problem is we often define that in really generic terms. So I was selling databases and we say, oh, there's more data than ever getting created and we need to manage that. Like any of my competitors could have said that. So because the definition of the problem was generic, I wasn't answering the question, why pick us over the other guys? Any of my competitors could have said they solved that problem too. So that was no good. There were a handful of more sort of edge things out there that I think people were using for sales pitch structures. A lot of them looked like the structure for a venture capital pitch. So it would start with, there's big disruption in the market, big change in the world, and there's going to be winners and losers. You want to be a loser, buddy? Do you know that be on the winning team? And here's why. And a lot of them I thought were inappropriate for sales pitches because there was first of all, this change in the world, everyone can see, much like the problem, everyone can see the change in the world. All my competitors are talking about the change too. So it's not specific to me. The second thing is that there was no concept of differentiated value, which is the core thing. The idea of most of these pitches that looked like VC pitches were, well, we're new, they're old and we're new, and there's inherent value in being the new thing. That works if you're, but most of the time, if I'm talking to a prospect, they've got lots of different new things they're looking at. So why is your new different and better than everyone else's new? I need to get into differentiated value. So if there's no differentiated value in the pitch structure, I don't know how to use it as a pitch. So I looked at all those things and said, okay, none of this is going to work for me. And
by the way, strategic narrative, I think, was the third thing. If people, because I've had Andy Raskin on the show before, and we've
have
talked
you?
about strategic narrative. We dive into that. Well, one of the
Yeah.
things that I really like that you did was define.
If I thought we could build a decent sales pitch out of that, I would have just used that thing and ran with it. But there's no value there. I don't understand how anyone could use that in a sales situation. I could see how you'd use it in other situations,
Yeah.
but in a sales pitch,
Well,
I don't
maybe
know.
we'll have Andy Raskin back on and we'll talk about that, and maybe he has an explanation to it. But I
Yeah.
really like how, there's all these topics that are circling around because we love to come up with different names for different things, and some of them kind of
Yes.
fit under the buckets. So there's like category design, and then there's positioning, and then there's strategic narrative, and there's like growth, and there's go to
And
market.
some
And
of
it's
these
like,
things are
what does
just
this
like, and
mean?
I'm just going to call it, some of these things are just made up. Like some of these things are just somebody had an idea and then they're just really noisy about it, but it's not based on anything. If I look at my sales pitch structure, it's based on, if you ask me where it came from, it is heavily rooted in the research that was done for the Challenger sale, which was a book that came out in 2010, 2011, which looked at a wide swath of successful salespeople and what did successful salespeople do versus what they didn't do, specifically in technology. And then more recently, there's a book called The Jolt Effect that analyzed 2.5 million sales calls and looked at what worked and didn't work in those sales situations. So I'm not just making this up. I didn't go to the coffee shop and have a talk with a guy and then say, hey, this is a great structure. I think we do need to have some kind of grounding in reality that says this is, and be able to explain this is why we do it the way we do it, and why I think it works. But sometimes I see people and they'll just make up a thing and it sounds good, but it goes against all the research. So for example, this idea that there's a new way and an old way and there's winners and losers and you don't want to be a loser, the research in the Jolt Effect shows that engaging in that kind of FOMO, like with a customer that is indecisive, actually drives close rates down. So it has the opposite effect.
Yeah, I think it's at like when you get to a certain point and they're in like the decision make at the very beginning when they're like not sure, just becoming aware, right? That might work. But when they're at a certain point where they're trying to figure out, like, should I make the decision or not? You telling them that, like, this is the new way and you're in the old way, that's not going to actually impact them, right? Because they're
Well,
trying
it
to
actually
reduce their
impacts them
risk.
negatively. It actually,
Yeah.
because they're indecisive and anxious, it actually makes them more indecisive and more likely to tilt over to no decision.
Yeah.
So why
Yeah.
are we
And
doing that? Why would we
right.
use a sales pitch that does that?
That's right.
I don't know. Like, so I
Yeah.
don't know. So I looked at the stuff that was out there and none of it seemed to match up with the research and what I knew to be true. And even my own personal experience having run in sales teams. So I looked at all that and said, well, okay, none of this is going to work. So I built my own thing. I didn't want to
Yeah.
build my own thing.
But you had to,
I
right?
would have been happy. I actually went on Amazon and looked at sales pitch. Like somebody's written a book about how to build a sales pitch, surely. And there was nothing. There's no book called sales pitch.
I
Can you
was
believe
wondering
that?
about that. I'm shocked actually because
Right?
that's exactly that's what people are trying to build, and that is the actual description of the name. So how could there be no book about it? But
How could
now
there
there
be no
is.
book about it?
Now there
There is
is.
now. Yeah.
So let's go back to that
So,
insight.
and to be
The
clear on it,
Yeah.
I think there is lots of different ways to structure a sales pitch because there's lots of different kinds of companies, like lots of different markets, lots of different situations in a market, competitive landscape, what your customers are like. Would never say that my structure is the only way to build a good sales pitch. Absolutely not. But I do think it's better than a handful of other things out there. I think it is demonstrably better than doing a product walkthrough because there's still a spot in the structure to expose the product. You're just doing it within the context of the value that the product delivers. So I think it's an improvement on that. And by far, that's what I've seen the most in terms of companies using. I would say like 90% more of companies that I'm working with are doing some kind of version of a product walkthrough as a sales pitch. Maybe a slide or two at the beginning, maybe a slide or two at the end. So I feel confident that my structure is better than that. And,
Yeah, I've seen that
sooner.
too.
Yeah.
From the companies I work with, that's pretty much the structure that I've seen as well for their sales deck. All right, so let's have some fun here. Insight. Let's start with the insight. Let's go me first, and then we'll talk about you. And you said this is the hardest part, but I'm going to try. Okay, what's my unique insight given my differentiated value and given my best fit customers and the unique value that matters to them that I bring? I mean, this is hard because I am clearly like my thing is I'm a fractional head of marketing, but I'm so much more than that because I have like partnerships with companies. Like I'm an advisor. I have a podcast. I have podcast sponsors. I um I'm on LinkedIn, right? And that's
What's
really
the
how
value
people
of that to your clients?
well, that's the thing. It's well, so I'm dabbling in a lot of these channels, right? So it's not everyone does. So I think that's not what I'm getting at. That's not the value. But when I say I'm a fractional head of marketing, that really ties back to the value. And I think when I think about the unique value,
Yeah, the
my the
question
way
is, why pick you? Because there's lots of fractional
yeah,
heads of
that's
marketing.
right. That's
So
right.
what's different about you? Like,
Yes.
why pick you over the other
Okay,
ones?
so this is the tough part, right? So my description on LinkedIn is the Marie Kondo of startup marketing. And that seems to really resonate because marketing is a mess. And not everybody enjoys coming into early stage startups and seeing that mess. They're like, nope, I'm leaving. I don't want to see any of this.
Oh, that's
But
interesting.
you need to
So
clean
and
up.
so what do
Yeah.
you like what does that mean? Like in terms of what you do? Like what do you do that's different that
Yeah.
is cleaning up this mess?
Yes. Well, first, I have to understand what kind of mess is it? Because there's like mindset mess where marketing is misunderstood by early
Mhm.
stage founders. So I have to clean up that mess. There's a mess of marketing is not sales, but for some reason they're treating it that way. And so sometimes it's just like the misunderstood part. But then
Oh,
there's also
see, I didn't go there on the mess. I was thinking there was an actual mess, like,
that's true
badly
too.
set up campaigns, badly set up stuff, and you were gonna come in and clean slate this thing and fix my closet, right? Like, make it all that's
Like
where I
Marie
went with the Marie
Kondo.
Kondo thing. Like, I wasn't thinking you're gonna fix
Yeah.
my mindset. All that stuff you're talking about, that's not where I went at all. I went, like, we're running a bunch of campaigns that don't actually work. We're doing a bunch of tactics that we're wasting money on, or we're just not doing it very well. We're kind of dabbling in a whole bunch of stuff, and you're going to come in and like clean that up, focus the thing on the two or three things that really work, make it all understandable for everybody in the company. That's where I went.
Well, there's two parts. There's the mindset mess and then there's the actually what are we doing? And for early stage startups, a lot of them aren't really doing a whole lot of marketing. So
Have you
sometimes
ever asked them what they think when they read that tagline?
the early
Marie
stage
Kondo? Like, what do
founders,
they think you're going to deliver with that?
no, I
Because you're
haven't.
saying it really resonates with them. Like, what do they think? Like, when they say, oh, yeah, that resonated because I thought you were, like, what do they say?
You
What do
know,
they think you're
April,
doing?
I haven't asked founders. When I say it resonates, it's people that are on LinkedIn that connect with me. And sometimes it's marketing folks at startups. A lot of them are actually marketing
This is
folks
the
at
danger
startups
of
because,
LinkedIn, I think. We have to
yeah,
be careful that we're keeping the main thing the main thing.
yeah,
So you got to be careful because a lot of your audience on LinkedIn is going to be other marketers and other people, and that's not who you sell to.
right. That's
So
a
you got to
great
be
point.
careful. Like
So,
it doesn't matter if it resonates for the other marketers. What
yeah,
matters
yeah,
is it resonates for your clients.
yeah,
So one thing is that, and you've said it a few times, is that you're really focused on these early stage folks. Not
yep.
all fractional CMOs do that. In fact, a lot of them will focus on mid stage companies or later stage companies. So you focus on this early stage thing. And then I do think it's really interesting, this idea of mindset about marketing and all that sort of stuff. I've not heard a lot of fractional CMOs talk about that stuff. So I think maybe that is your big differentiated thing. And then I think if let's say it was, so let's say, and I don't know anything about your business, so I'm gonna riff on this. But let's say it was like mindset about marketing, and you came in, and part of what you're going to do is educate the team about marketing so they can get the right mindset, so they can start with this foundation of stuff. Then I could reverse engineer the insight at the start of this pitch would be, look, a lot of early stage companies are failing at marketing, and it's not tactical execution that's messing them up. Is actually a mindset thing. They're thinking about marketing wrong.
I
And
love that.
right. So, like, let's say that's what your thing was. I don't know if this works or not. And then that sort of begs the question, like, oh, how are you going to fix that? And then I think you'd have to get into that. So, if you were out there talking about that, then you say, look, like, there's lots of other folks out there that focus on later stage companies and do get into the weeds with a lot of tactical things. Because I'm focused on these earlier stage companies and I've seen this mindset problem, I think we have to tackle that first before we get to the other things. What's the value of that? I don't know. It's a little mushy. I don't know, but I could riff on that. Typically, what the insight is it's the thing that your customer needs to understand in order to understand your differentiated value. So if they don't understand understand mindset is a problem, then you're going to have to teach them that, or you're going to have to start with that. And you're going to have to make the case for, hey, you got a mindset problem. So that when I get to step 3 of this perfect world, I'm going to say, so can we agree that for a company like you at your stage, what you really want is someone that can come in and build this foundation so that everything you do on top of that is better. And part of that foundation is it's mindset, it's this, it's that, whatever your pitch is.
You know what? This is the first time I'm thinking about it in that way. And like from when I ask my customers what value they get, because sometimes I invite them back on the podcast and I'm like, can you just talk about the value I brought you? Sometimes they share that it's the process and how I gave them like the reason behind what they're doing. So I think that does tie back to mindset, because understanding the why. And that's why I started season 4 asking more why questions, because I don't think that people do that enough. They don't ask why.
It's
They just
really
do it.
interesting. Like it could be that your value is really around, these folks don't have a background in marketing. They've never done it before. They're super early stage. So they need marketing help, but they also need marketing education. I think maybe what you're doing is helping them learn or build this foundation so that they can do their own stuff in the future, or do a better job of hiring marketing people to help them, or do a better job of just all the stuff around that. I think a lot of early stage founders really want that.
Wow. I feel like we got through a lot here, April.
There you go.
That was great.
We're solving your positioning problems right here.
And then I don't know anybody else who, yes, absolutely. This is amazing. So, because I've been like banging my head against the wall saying like fractional head of marketing. Well, there's tons of fractional heads of marketing, but what makes me unique? There's got to be something, right? Even if there aren't a ton of early stage fractional heads of marketing still. So the alternatives, the different approaches are your other consultants, right? Maybe you're hiring someone full time, but a lot of times you can't hire a leader that's a fractional leader. You can hire someone that's junior. You don't have a ton of money, but a fractional.
And in your case, you may not need to dwell too much on the alternative solutions, because it may just kind of be implied. You're talking to me, you're talking to other fractional CMOs. The fact that you're talking to me at all means you've already maybe made a decision to not bring somebody in-house, or you decided it's too expensive to not bring somebody in-house. Sometimes we can eliminate some of these things because we know, like the fact that you're on the phone and you filled in my form and we got all the way to here means you've already decided that that's not a choice for you. But you could have that conversation just to make sure. But really, I think your big thing, the obvious alternative, is hire somebody else that isn't you. And so all you really have to do is make the case for you and why you're different and a good fit for this particular company that's sitting across from you.
Yeah, I love it. And then the perfect world that I paint is going to have to be all around this mindset, this foundation. Like, do you need someone that will literally like walk through step by step and help you so that the decisions you make later on are better?
That's right.
Versus not doing that. So
exactly.
Cool. Exactly. I love it. Did you know that somebody found me, a prospect came on a discovery call. They found me through Google search. They're like, well, we did a Google search and and your name came up. And I was like, this is the first time I came up in a Google search.
Well, there you go. That content you're creating is good for your search rankings, or there's something there. Yeah.
But they said there are 5 other people that also came up in Google search. So I'm like,
sure
do I like Google search? I don't really like Google search.
Yeah, so, I'm sure there would be. A lot of people come to me in a Google search. I mean, it's generally not the only thing. Like the vast majority of people that come to me have read my book.
That totally makes sense, because they're bought in. Like they're reading your stuff, they're devouring it, they're binging on your book, right? They're bought in. They just then either want to work with you or don't need the help.
And that's the job of the book. Like the job of the book is to communicate my stuff and give you the tools to attempt to do it yourself. And if you get it done with just the book, great. You didn't need to work with me. And if you did it with the book and you got stuck, then you call me. So that's the majority of my business comes that way, or through referrals. But even the referrals will read the book first. Like they won't come to me first.
That makes
the
a lot of
referrals
sense.
will all go and read the book.
What would you say is your unique insight into the market and your differentiated value? Like when you think about that for your own business?
Yeah, it's a handful of things. So one thing is, and this was more true at the beginning, but I've noticed other folks that do work like me have now sort of adjusted and they're doing it my way too. But at the beginning, I was the only only one that was doing this with a cross-functional team. Almost everybody else would come in and do it the way those positioning consultants that frustrated me when I was in-house would do it. So they would interview your customers and then interview all the people in-house and then go away and do the secret work and then come back. Or sometimes they'd go away with just the CEO, do the secret work, and then come back and unveil it to the team. And then invariably the team is like, what is this garbage? It wouldn't stick. And the sales team would hate it and whatever. So I was at the beginning, anyways. Now I know other people that are doing with this cross-functional team. But at the beginning, my big differentiator was I am not trying to be an expert in your business. You are the experts in your business. I am there as a facilitator and to walk you through the process and to pull it out of you. And the big thing we need is the right people together in the room. A big piece of the value I deliver is agreement and alignment across the team, because I think a lot of weak positioning comes from different parts of the team are in disagreement about this. So one of the big reasons you hire me is agreement alignment across the team, because that's the way we're going to make a shift in positioning stick. So that's one thing. I would say my focus on sales is the other big differentiator. Most of the companies that come to me, they're not looking for a pitch for investors. They're not looking for a story about the vision or something. They're coming to me because they want sales to go up to the right. And so I am very focused on making that happen. So if you do a workshop with me, the day after we have the workshop, you've got a new sales pitch that you could start testing next week. And if that sales pitch is better than the old pitch, which I can guarantee it's going to be, that is going to have an immediate impact on revenue. And I think a lot of folks doing this work are kind of coming at it more from the marketing side. And this stuff is a little more fluffy and airy. And there's, we're kind of working on this big story thing and we're going to make it live in marketing, but maybe months from now. And my stuff is we're going to come in, we're going to spend a week together. And at the end of that week, you're going to have a new sales pitch. 2 weeks from now, you're going to see a difference in revenue. My stuff's all about revenue. Like we're just here to make the numbers go up. Like we're not here to like raise money or tell some fluffy story or whatever. We're here to like sell more deals.
Yes. April,
that's my thing. Like my thing is, that's my thing. You come to me, we're just talking about revenue.
When you don't get that agreement and alignment across a team, has that happened before? You're doing your workshop. Okay. How do you
in the
get
workshop?
that?
I thought you meant like in the pitch. When I pitch that doesn't resonate with everybody. Some people come and they want something different. Some companies come to me and they want a VC pitch and they don't understand the difference between a sales pitch and a VC pitch. And if that's what they want, I'd say, that's not my jam. I don't do that. I'm going to go to somebody else for that. That's not my thing. Some people come and sometimes I'll get the head of marketing reach out to me. And what they actually want is customer research. What they're worried about is that marketing does not know enough about the market and buyers and how they behave to do their job. And I don't do customer research. So I have friends of mine that do customer research. So I recommend people for that.
Yeah.
But I don't do that work. I'm very narrowly focused on one thing. So if that's what they want, then I disqualify them. So there's all this kind of stuff. But sorry, what was your question again?
My question was the agreement and alignment, if it's not there once you actually do the workshop.
Dude, the workshop's not over until we got that.
Okay,
we get it.
You just
100% of the time.
The teeth and pull 100%
of 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And you know what? One time. So I'll tell you the story. One time I had a problem with that once, and there was 2 co-founders, and we got everybody in agreement except the one co-founder. So the whole executive team and the one founder, everybody in agreement except for the one co-founder. And so we took a break. We came back the next day. The co-founder came in, and I wrote up the notes and sent it around. I said, so how's everybody feeling? Everybody's really excited except the one co-founder. And it was terrible. He came and he said, I read it. I looked at it. And you know what? You're right. You are all right. This is what we are. And this is the value we deliver. I just don't want to work at that company.
No way.
That actually happened.
Did he leave?
He did.
Wow. This is drama. Yeah.
It was drama. But so which was why we were having a hard time getting him into agreement. It wasn't that we were landing on the thing that was true. It wasn't the thing that he wanted it to be.
And it's a co-founder and it's like very near and dear to their heart, right? This is like the baby that they
this is the thing with positioning. We don't get to just make this up. It has to be grounded in the reality of the product in the market. And so we can't pretend that the product does stuff it doesn't do. We can't pretend that we deliver value that we simply do not.
Yeah.
And sometimes when there's positioning problem, it's because there's some wishful thinking going on inside the team that they want to be something they aren't, but they haven't built the product to do that. That is a product strategy problem, not a positioning problem. All we can do in positioning is craft the best possible story to sell what we got on the truck.
That's all we got to do.
That's it. That's all
Sounds
we can do. That's
simple.
all we can do. And so if we don't like what's on the truck and the value of the stuff we sell on the truck, well, then you better get building some new stuff. So that next year we're selling something different. But I don't think positioning doesn't change the core value of what you do.
I'm going to find April. She is on LinkedIn, April Dunford. Check out her website, April Dunford, and listen to her podcast, Positioning with April Dunford. Thank you so much, April.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.